Thanks everyone for joining. Oh, I already have a mic, actually. I can pass you this one. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining me, both people that are here live and the ones joining me in the live stream. I'm going to be talking about the big split. So I gave a very friendly title with how DEX trading and liquidity are separating, but what I actually meant by that is DEXs are breaking apart. And you know what? That's actually a good thing. So before we start, I want you all to briefly close your eyes and imagine what is a DEX for you. You probably all think pretty much the same thing. Two text boxes, one with an input, one with an output. You choose an asset, it calculates something, and then it spits something else out. Then you connect your wallet, you approve it, and you do the actual swap. I chose all of these different examples very deliberately because they are all incredibly similar to each other. They all have a pretty identical interface. But in each one of them, something very different is happening behind the scenes. So what actually happens behind the DEX? I made a very simple flow so we could all navigate through it together. Basically, we have somebody accessing the trade. This trade has to be communicated somehow to different poolers and different assets. And there has to be something in the middle that can be called a connector, a router. There's a million different names. But basically, somebody has to say, how do I deliver this quote to the poolers? And how do the poolers deliver this quote back to the final person that is doing the trading? And it looks simple, right? It looks like a very simple back and forth. It looks like a handshake. And if you don't do much about DEXs, you think that's where the story finishes. But actually, every single time that a trade is going on, there is a big tug of war happening. There is a fight in every single one of these steps. So on one side, you have the traders. You have the people that obviously they want the best trades. They want the most bang for the buck. They want the low cost. There's a very specific, it's a very general requirement. It can be anything from like low MEV protection. They can be gas. It could be a gasless trade. It could be gas refunded. Slippage fees. Basically, they don't want to spend a lot for the trade. And they want low latency. It kind of connects with the slippage side of things. Like the longer it takes to calculate the trade, the more the market moves, the more your rate is going to be changing, and the more you're going to be waiting for your trades. On the other hand, you have the people that are giving you the liquidity, the actual poolers, and they want something different from the traders. They don't want losses. These can mean anything from like impermanent loss. They don't want something like security losses. They want the maximum return with fees. This can be from trading fees. They can be incentivization, can be gauges, but basically they want to get more than what they initially put in. And the final one, people want to do different things with their assets. You cannot really make everyone fit into a single box. So you need to be able to accommodate different strategies from the single degen to the big institutional investors that we're hoping are going to be coming back anytime soon. But yeah. And in the middle, you have this complication. How do you reconcile these two? You have the connectors. So I went with this analogy of knots because there's a million different knots that you could be using depending on what you actually want to be doing. Do you want a very thin knot that is going to be handling everything basically on chain? Do you want a very thick knot that is going to be calculating everything, it's going to be incredibly robust, it's going to be planning for every eventuality? Do you want one that has like unique knots that have like jumps in the middle? It's really going to depend on the kind of traders and the kind of poolers that you're actually using. And up until now, and this is the part that is going to be mind-boggling for the people that are not used to DEXs, all of these things, all of these contradictions, they had to fit into a single DEX. Whenever you were building a decentralized exchange, you were expected to have a good front end that would be pleasing these traders. You were supposed to have a good pooling interface to make people actually pool your assets. And you were supposed to have a good connector that was going to be able to navigate through all the pools in a acceptable time. But we can see that that's not possible. There's so many contradictions happening with one another. So how do we deal with this? How does a single DEX manage to balance all of these interests? How do we fix it? Well, I devised a very scientific diagram now to explain the solution that I want to devise for how to move forward with these DEXs. Here's the DEX. No more DEX. So during my time working at Paraswap, I've been noticing that this actually has been happening more and more. over time, but it's kind of been like a silent revolution. We've been seeing this split happening more and more with different examples. And we're going to be now briefly navigating through each one of them to try to pitch to you this idea that maybe DEXs becoming like this, breaking apart into smaller and smaller examples, are going to be much better than these monolithic ideas that we used to have before. So the most obvious example, which is the one that like Paraswap is built for, is routing. So getting the most bang from your buck. Instead of having a generic router, this ability of DEX being split has led to much better efficiency. I like to believe that this has also been a response following the recent decrease in liquidity in many different exchanges. You have like a limited amount of liquidity. People want to be making big trades. How do you maximize it? And the example that I brought here was something that Paraswap collaborated with QuickSwap following their new V3 integration. So being able to have a dedicated router as opposed to a generic one brings two big advantages. The first one I already mentioned. You get to be a lot more efficient. You get to see the steps in between. You get to see ways to navigate different pools, different assets, to be able to do everything. And of course, if somebody is dedicated to this, if somebody is able to do all of these computationally difficult tasks to get the best rate possible, you're going to be able to receive much more than somebody who does a very simple calculation that is just like sort by orders, get this thing, and get whatever comes out. But the second advantage, which is kind of going to be connecting to the next block, is that thanks to these kind of like specific routing that is able to go through different pools and different versions, you allow people to connect different kinds of pooling together. So through the old kind of routing, if you wanted to go from a V2 to a V3, I'm sure that all of you OGs are familiar with this. You had to do like the big migration. You had to decide, OK, we have the legacy pools. We have this one. How are we going to be displaying it in the interface? Are we going to have a toggle from one to the other? Your liquidity is going to be split. And now, with a single streamlined interface, you get to have all of this happening in a single trade. And not a single dollar gets wasted. And obviously, that benefits DEXs, but it goes a step further with pooling. And in my opinion, this is the most exciting development that we've seen over the last year and over the entire bear market. I really think that we're seeing a lot more niche solutions that people really wanted and didn't notice until now. Here's a few. It's not comprehensive, but there's some examples of ways that pooling has become a lot more specific now. We have small niche DEXs that are trying things different from what it used to be done before, such as with Swap Finance and their Swap B2 model. Instead of the usual Uniswap-based model, which relies on arbitrage to be able to balance all the different pools, they've gone with a Chainlink Oracle to be able to minimize the impermanent loss and be able to maximize the swap fees. I am not super technical with how they've been able to do this, but what I've known is that the efficiency has been insane with this. So looking at this from the side of Paraswap, from what I've been able to see, in some months, every single trade below 10K had at least some parts going through swap, like 30% going through it on the ETH-USDC one. And this was with a very brief amount of TVL. So thanks to this split, we are seeing this rise of new DEXs with new ideas, be it like programmable orders, like we see somebody from Mangrove here in the audience. We have these swap solutions that are minimizing impermanent loss, which used to be something that in the past was impossible. But let's also flip things around. This is a solution for niche liquidity pooling, but what about people that are developing? One very interesting example that I've also been seeing has been with Algebra Finance. They offer like very concentrated liquidity engines, but they've been offering it to a different variety of DEXs all throughout the space. So it started with QuickSwap, then they went with Camelot, Thena, and they're able to provide this concentrated liquidity engine as a service and be able to integrate into these new DEXs. And this would not have been possible if we had this kind of monolithic DEX model happening before. They are able to build what they know, collaborate with other DEXs, and be able to do this kind of solution thanks to the increased composability of splitting DEXs. So we've covered the side on the pooling. We've covered the side on the software, like why they should be benefiting from this. But let's go even a step above. What if you do not want to be profitable from just trading fees alone? What if you want to be going with even more composable and like interesting gauge mechanisms? So that's where you go with ideas like Balancer and Curve with their different systems. I went with Curve because they have their automatic Vnomics and Gauges, but they go even a step further on the weirdness, which is why I really love them. They're able to have these balanced assets where if you can decide that you actually want your liquidity pool to be 80%, 50%, multiple assets, you can build everything however you want it. And finally, what all of these have in common is that they've all mentioned the same thing, that without this kind of split, without of this aggregation, they would not have been able to thrive. Imagine you're building these kind of incredibly niche products, and you also have to worry about getting your own front end, making the people swap only through you, through your very specific case, making sure that people actually stick with it, making sure that liquidity shifts. It's impossible. But by integrating all of these together, we're able to see these strategies and these solutions, and DeFi becomes a lot more exciting for everyone. So at least for me, it feels like something else is being built thanks to all of these composability. So I wanted to go with a final advantage that if we have any designers in the audience, they're really going to be enjoying this, which is the UI. We are able to finally judge a DEX by its cover. I'm going to show these three. Again, I'm using Paraswap as an example because that's the one that I know. You talk about what you know. But all of these are using Paraswap in a different way with different levels of complexity. You start with Argent, which is a wallet, and they have a very simple interface from swapping from one to the other, and the amount you get in network fee. So that is the level one. But what if, for example, you already know about trading and you want to go even a step above that? Using the same API, using the same interfaces, you get to build something like with Furu Combo, which lies in that middle of you know enough about trading, you know enough about strategies, but you're not satisfied with a simple swapping A to swapping B. You want to have more in-between steps, but you still don't know how to program. So here's another level that you're building on top. The biggest example, that's why I used the screenshot, is that you're able to access stuff like Aave flash loans directly through dragging and dropping different cubes. And me, I'm not a dev guy. I am a complete smooth brain that up until now, flash loans were completely scary for me. And introducing this kind of interface suddenly opened this world of possibilities to me. But let's say that a miracle happens and I start programming. You can abstract all of this away and be able to go directly through the API. And then you can build whatever you want. You can build maybe something that doesn't have an interface. It's an automatic bot that does some conditions. Or you can have a simple command line if you're the kind of person that absolutely loves having a Unix interface and running everything through the SSH. There you have an API. So these are just three examples, but I hope you can see what I mean now with, even though we're presenting the same thing, which is basically all of these DEX aggregation gone through a single entry point, we finally have this ability of giving one for every single user, which I know that with the current market sentiment, we keep thinking, like, what are we building here that is different from Web 2? What is different now from what we were doing before? And think of this. In previous ecosystems, in permissioned ecosystems, every single designer, every single UI was thinking, how do we make something that satisfies everyone? And it's not possible, but they had to be able to fit everything maybe through a simple interface and an advanced one. And here you can build everything finally for every person's dreams. So yeah, that goes to where do we go from here? There's always the meme that's been happening from the beginning of DeFi about money Legos. The idea that every single part is composable, you have the different blocks, and you build them from each other. This, yeah, it was true before. It was happening for a while since DeFi summer or even before. But I really believe that the Cambrian explosion is happening now. So I come from a biological background. For those that do not know, the Cambrian explosion was a point in evolution where we went from like basically very simple life to everything developing all sorts of weirdness. Everything was being tried. Everything is being able to be exploded thanks to the sheer amount of choices and the sheer amount of things that were happening, this never-ending wheel. And I really think that by breaking down DEXs and having this amount of immense composability, we're really entering this stage. We finally get to have a use case for every single kind of user. Think of it. Instead of having to be like, OK, I'm going to be building an interface that I personally like, are we going to have enough people that are going to be using this interface? you don't have to worry about it anymore. If you have a small group of weirdos that like having this kind of weirdo trading, you can build for them. If you want to have an extremely accessible trading interface that doesn't even notice that it's DeFi, you can build that one, and you can utilize all of them with all the steps in between that you want, thanks to this amazing level of composability. And finally, and this I think is the most exciting one even for me, you get to build on the shoulders of giants. You do not have to reinvent the wheel every single time you want to develop a new product. So I think you're all familiar with this. It's part of learning and experience, trying to build something, is there's something that you actually really care about, something that you're really excited about. But on the way, there's all of these small pesky things that you have to learn to be able to make it go live. So for example, you have this brand new liquidity idea for poolers to be able to have everything working without having to worry about it. And you're a genius of it. You've studied about this university. You've seen other examples. You want to program that. You make it go live, and then you wonder, OK, how do I make the traders arrive now? Where's the volume? And by having this level of composability, you can borrow from one, you can borrow from the other, you can have all of these being built. And not only do you have to skip all of those parts, you can build from everyone else, but also they benefit from it. We end up having this amazing ecosystem where we have these incredibly niche products built from each other. And to finish, I'm going to have a personal tangent because, I mean, we've already gone through 2 days of crypto talk. And I want to show an example of why this is so awesome from another hobby that I've been doing in my free time. This is Stable Diffusion, a self-hosted AI model. OK? Can you guess how this UI is called? They call it Comfy UI. Supposedly, this is a comfortable way of approaching things. It's very similar to Blender nodes. It's very similar to this kind of like programming-like interface. But as somebody that doesn't know programming, as somebody that is not able to do these kind of things, it felt incredibly overwhelming for me. And in a way, we started seeing these communities that were in a similar position. They were like, OK, I do not know how to handle this. How can I make it more accessible? And then people started making their own pre-made nodes, these own pre-made ways of showing all of this while abstracting away the complexity. So for example, now I'm using a very specific kind of node that all of this spaghetti is completely out of the picture. All you do is put the text, you put the image you want to be putting in, you put the seeds, and then it automatically outputs the image. And from there, if I can make it that I do not understand diffusion models, I do not understand Python programming, I do not understand any of this, I just understand that I want to make a pretty parrot. If I can make a pretty parrot with these comfy UIs, we can get something similar going in the world of DeFi, in my opinion. Even if you're not a programmer, just get the nodes and get everything going. I wonder if that buzz was for me. Well, anyway, thank you so much for attending this talk. I hope you got something out of it. I have a PO-up if you want to scan it afterwards. And yeah, if you have any questions, we have even a couple more minutes.
Thank you very much, Oxytocin.